What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Friday, December 21st, 2018. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. And we have got a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And Dan, at the moment, is in our control room, ready to answer the phone, put you on the air with your comments, questions, and observations here. Before we get into the news here, a couple of things, little program notes. First of all, the lovely Lady Claire will be joining us in hour number 3. And for those of you on YouTube, having this chair here is always the giveaway that she's going to make an appearance here. The other thing, of course, is the RBN holiday schedule. And I wanted to lay that out so you know what to expect. Because Christmas is on Tuesday, RBN has very generously given both Christmas Day and Christmas Eve, that's Monday and Tuesday, off for our hardworking technical people and hardworking on-air hosts. So we're going to get a 4-day weekend, and the same thing will repeat the following week with New Year's. So today is our last show before Christmas, and we'll be back here live next Wednesday. So please make a note of that, and I'll be putting an announcement up at the website here. All right, so let's get into it. There is still a lot of Sturm und Drang over Donald Trump's sudden announcement to end what is admittedly an unconstitutional war in Syria. And the warmongering left has joined forces with the warmongering neocons to demand that Trump reverse course on this decision. And neocons are claiming ISIS will increase with the U.S. absence. But it was the U.S. intervention in the region that led to the rise of these extremist terrorist groups. And we know that during the Obama administration, the United States was actually funding and supporting ISIS as a proxy against Bashar al-Assad. So it is really hypocritical for them to turn around and say we have to stay in Syria because of a problem that our government itself created. But basically, Donald Trump has taken a decisive stand against the military and Congress. And apparently last Friday, a week ago, Trump had a long phone call with the Turkish President Erdogan. And it was after that that he overruled all his advisors and decided to remove the U.S. boots from Syria and also to end the air war. And this gives us confirmation that right now Trump is surrounded by advisors who are pushing that war agenda. And so this is the first time Trump took a decisive stand against the Borg, which is that permanent neocon and interventionist establishment in the administration, the military and the Congress that usually dictates U.S. foreign policy, even though that is supposed to be under the control of the executive branch. And he showed some spine. All of a sudden, he's looking presidential. He's got those presidential brass knuckles on. Well done. And I think while some portions of the corporate media, not all, but some portions of the corporate media are very critical of Donald Trump for this, and the deep state certainly is, I would imagine that probably the overall reaction of ordinary people in this country is, thank goodness, it's been 7 years. It's been 7 years. All that money, all that blood, and how did it help this nation? Now, Tucker Carlson, his reaction to Trump pulling the troops out of Syria is, this is a great decision. Now, there's a somewhat different opinion over at MSNBC, where one of their hosts basically said that she would be cheered if the military doesn't listen to Trump. She's actually talking military coup. Out in Hollywood, the liberals are just, they're going bananas. And I used to think that progressives were supposed to oppose wars and illegal occupations, but oh no, they're fully on board. Yeah, go on out and, have another war so we can make movies about it or something. So a lot of people are saying this is a positive wind down for the conflict. We're able to leave Syria gracefully, declare victory over ISIS, even though we all know that wasn't the real agenda. But still, being able to declare victory and walk out of Syria certainly beats having to fly out of Syria with a bunch of Marines dangling underneath the helicopter here. Now, Trump's critics are literally calling for his removal from office over his Syria decision. Conservative pundit Eric Erickson, a never-Trumper, who actually rallied to the president's side during the fight over Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh's confirmation, suggested on Twitter that Trump would face a military coup in a lesser country. So that's some very dangerous rhetoric that's out there. And on the other side, you have the anti-war voices saying, of course, Trump should withdraw U.S. troops from Syria and from Afghanistan and from Yemen and from Iraq and from all these other places like Libya. 7 officially declared war, and according to Bernie Sanders, 77 interventions around the world. Trillions of dollars it's cost. Countless lives. And it has not made this country any better. One tiny bit. There's been not one positive outcome whatsoever. I mean, the oil companies are happy. Israel's happy. And I guess that's all that really matters in Washington, D.C. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Another point of view is coming out from the original antiwar.com saying, giving credit where credit is due, Trump is right on Syria. Now, on CNN, Democratic Representative House Minority Whip Steny Hoyer described Trump's move as impulsive, irresponsible, and dangerous. And Lindsey Graham, who's a true Hawks hawk, declared on the Senate floor that Trump's decision is a disaster and a stain on the honor of the United States. I mean, when maintaining national honor becomes a last-ditch argument for continuing war, perhaps it really is time to leave. There was nothing honorable about this war. There's nothing honorable about any war. I mean, the government can provide all kinds of fancy uniforms and medals and pins and decorations and flags to make it look like it's something noble, but it's still just mass murder wrapped in a flag. Now, a lot of people are out there saying that this decision to pull out of Syria is a victory for Russia. It's a present to Vladimir Putin. How could Trump do this here? But analysts are saying that peace signals on Syria could actually incite sharper conflict in the Ukraine. That's hardly a gift. But basically, it's clear Donald Trump is deeply at odds with the Pentagon. Military officials say they were completely blindsided by Trump. And it's now been confirmed that James Mattis' resignation was because of what Trump did in Syria and was intended as a rebuke. I think it will allow Donald Trump to get a Secretary of Defense whose worldview is more aligned with his. In fact, I'll be very honest, I think we're going to see a lot of staff changes at the highest levels in the government in the coming months. Because apparently Trump woke up one morning and said, this wasn't a dream, I really am the president. By golly, I got to start acting like one. Now, we're getting a confirmation here that after all of the U.S. troops are out of Syria, the air war will be over. U.S. warplanes will stop striking Syria after the troops have left. Now, the Pentagon is refusing to confirm the decision officially, saying that they will keep conducting airstrikes so long as U.S. troops are on the ground. After that, they said they would not speculate. So it looks like we're coming up on a conflict between the Pentagon leadership and the president. But the president is the commander-in-chief. It's almost starting to remind me of the fight between General Douglas MacArthur and Harry Truman. And as a reminder to all the generals who might be listening to this show, Harry Truman won that one. All right, we're going to take a phone call here. Don in the Philippines, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. Yes, the Trump is making some moves here that will help him politically if he does run again. I have no idea whether he's going to run again, but people don't like war. It's a popular move politically to get out of Syria, and he's talking about getting out of Afghanistan too. They're saying,
yeah.
He's finally got rid. You notice he's got rid one by one. He's got rid of all these generals that were hanging around him. They were basically, I think these guys, I mean, they're in the military 40 years. They all were trying to enforce the main long-range plan that the Pentagon had. I mean, that's the way the military thinks. They don't think about what's going on now. They all have these long-range plans. First one he got rid of was McMaster. He finally got rid of Kelly. Now Mattis has hit the road. All kind of hit the road. And at the same time, he did this Criminal Reform Act, which I still don't know exactly what all that entailed, but I think it said something about there's too many people in the prisons for drug offenses, didn't it?
Yeah, that was the main gist of it, is that they're calling for lighter penalties for possession of small amounts of recreational drugs, which, considering how many states have already legalized marijuana for recreational purposes, it makes sense to sort of pull on back and say, look, we can't lock these people up for having a single marijuana cigarette. And that came out of that whole zero tolerance policy. And the prisons are full, and it's turned into an industry where these people who've been they've been pulled out of their lives and thrown into these prison factories. They're working for way below minimum wage, and they're doing things like manning call centers or building furniture and stuff like that. And the prison factories are making huge profits, and legitimate American businesses who are paying the minimum wage, if not more, can't compete with them. It's time for that situation to unwind. And I think at some point, it would be nice to go back and look at some of these drug convictions for minor amounts of illicit substances and say, it's time to start releasing these people and let them get on with their lives. And you know, Trump could literally write a mass pardon and say everybody who was arrested and imprisoned for having X or less amount of marijuana is hereby presidentially pardoned.
All I'm saying is, regardless of what the mainstream media, what they say, he's a traitor, he's has no guts, or what. Lindsey Graham, when he tried to run for the Republican nomination, had less than 1% of the votes. I mean, so Trump is doing what the people want, and politically, he's making some good moves now. And I wouldn't doubt it if he does run again right before the election. He'll come out and say something along the lines, legalize marijuana, or at least we're not going to hassle people for marijuana at the federal level or something like that. And so he's, in a way, he's triangulating. He's going away from the rhinos. He never was really a Republican. You know, he ran on the Republican ticket because that's what was available. He's going away from the rhinos and saying, hey, he's triangulating. He's trying to get some more votes from the Democrats, which is how I was a Democrat and I voted for him. That's how he got elected the first time. So that's all I had to say, Mike. Thanks a lot.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. And we're going to let you go. And let's see, getting on back here. It does look like this is really happening because the U.S. Is evacuating their base in Al-Tanf. And if you'll remember, not too long ago, the Russians began to encircle that with these outposts that were equipped with air defense systems. And so it looks like the U.S. is basically pulling out of that. Okay, so once again, it looks like Trump made his final decision to leave Syria after talking to Turkey's Erdogan. And there appears to be a little bit of deal-making there, where, as you know, Erdogan wants to go into northeastern Syria and basically deal with the Syrian Kurds. And the U.S. alliance with the Syrian Kurds, at least according to this article, which is out of antiwar.com, was always going to be temporary. And the U.S. alliance with Turkey is a long-term priority. So basically, the U.S. government has sent the message to the Kurds, you're on your own, thank you, good night. Now, Erdogan himself is now saying he's going to delay the operation in northeastern Syria until the United States is gone and the air campaign has stopped. So everybody's getting out of everybody else's way. That's basically what Trump has done. He, rather than risk a conflict with Turkey, he's basically said, we're going to get out of your way and you guys can sort this mess out all for yourself. Now, the Kurds, who are just beginning to realize they have been abandoned by their previous sponsors, are freeing thousands of ISIS terrorists they had captured. They're just letting them go, and that's probably going to cause some problems across Syria. But I think the Syrian Arab army and Russia are going to be able to deal with it. In fact, I would not be surprised if a lot of these ISIS terrorists accepted Assad's offer of amnesty and just said, I'm just going to go back home and, you know, plant some crops and just live my life and try and forget this whole thing ever happened here. Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates are saying they're going to step on in to support the Kurds in Syria. Nature abhors a vacuum, and the U.S. withdrawal from Syria has created a power vacuum there, and other players are stepping on in. And Trump is saying, that's fine. You know, we'll let them take care of their own issues. It's really not our business anyway. Now, Trump's announcement caught everybody by surprise. It shouldn't have. He was talking about this last March, about how he wanted to get out of Syria. And apparently back in March, he was convinced by his advisors, no, we got to stay on in there forever. And this time he stood firm. And he did not give anybody advance notice. He didn't want to take the chance somebody was going to find some way to wreck the deal. So he just came on out and made the announcement. He didn't give advance notice to the Pentagon or the intelligence agencies and the leaders in Europe, Macron, May, and Merkel. Macron, May, and Merkel sounds like a law firm. They found out about it from the media like the rest of us. They had no advance notice. Now, there is a school of thought out there saying, nah, this is not going to last. Trump is going to cave again. I don't know, and I have a very good reason for thinking that, but Claire wants to talk about this in hour number 3 as to what Trump's motivations may have been. So we're going to put off that discussion till hour number 3. But basically, Trump said when he became president, the agenda in Syria was to defeat ISIS, and ISIS is defeated. And that was his only reason for being there, and that's why he's getting out. And Trump is doing exactly what he promised to do in his campaign. And what he's effectively saying is, we're extricating America from the forever war of the Middle East, so foolishly begun by previous presidents. We are coming home. The rulers and peoples of this region are going to have to find their own way and fight their own wars. We are not so powerful that we can fight their wars while we also confront Iran and North Korea and face new Cold Wars with Russia and China. So part of his motivation may have been that report that came on out earlier from the Pentagon saying that there just weren't the resources to keep on doing all of this stuff. Now, Iran seems to be everybody's priority, only because Israel says so. And as far as Russia and China are concerned, the Cold War is just about bleeding more money out of our pockets to build weapons that hopefully never get used. Same scam they pulled back in the 1950s and 1960s. Anyway, we got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha America, welcome back to our show here. One other factor may have come into play in Trump's Syria withdrawal order. It was only a couple of weeks ago where everyone was saying this war is pretty much over. It's time for the U.S. to come home. And we started hearing from people like James Mattis and Bolton that no, we're going to be in Syria forever. And this may have played part of the process of Trump saying, no, we're not going to stay there forever. There's no real reason for us to continue staying there forever. And I think it just comes down to the fact that Trump just decided enough is enough. And I'm glad he's standing up to these people because they're wrecking his presidency. Now, Trump has decided to pull about 7,000 troops from Afghanistan. The Afghan presidency is saying, nah, it's not going to affect our security. So this official told Agence France Presse that roughly half of the 14,000 U.S. forces in Afghanistan would leave within the next several months. And this move apparently upset diplomats and officials in Kabul who are pushing to end the 17-year conflict with the Taliban, which already controls vast amounts of territory and is causing unsustainable Afghan troop casualties. Now, the funny thing is, at the end of 2001, the Taliban were all but gone. And from then to now, 17 years, they've been winning, even with the American presence there. And maybe Trump is thinking, let's get out gracefully while we still can, rather than suffer a very visible and humiliating defeat here. Now, Lindsey Graham, the Hawk's hawk, is out there saying that if Trump pulled these troops out of Afghanistan, we're setting in motion the loss of all of our gains and paving the way toward a second 9/11. Well, apparently Lindsey Graham seems to have forgotten that after Afghanistan was blamed for 9/11, then they shifted it to Iraq. And Afghanistan was off the hook. And then we have this video of George W. Bush admitting Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11. Now, as far as loss of all of our gains, well, the oil is still going to be flowing. Might just have to pay a little bit more for that pipeline right of way. Certainly, the opium is going to be shut down. The Taliban has a zero tolerance policy on opium. Under the Taliban, Afghanistan shut down all opium production. And that was a major loss to all of the world's drug lords and pharmaceutical corporations. But I repeat myself. So he's out there saying that this is a bad thing. Now, Blackwater founder is hoping that John Bolton will embrace a plan for privatizing the Afghan war. And apparently, Eric Prince has a plan. It's going to be expensive. But he hopes that Bolton will make the decision in his favor. Well, I think as long as Trump has put on those presidential brass knuckles, it is time for him to remind Bolton just who the boss is. Because Bolton is also out there saying, no, we can't leave Syria. Got all these people running around challenging the president. He is the president, and policy is his purview. His job is to make decisions. And no, they may not always be right, but that's what he's supposed to do. And the machinery of government is supposed to say, all right, we're going to implement the policy decisions, not come on out with our own policy and try and implement that, which is what we've been seeing from Bolton and Mattis and a whole bunch of other people. Oh, forget what Mr. Orangehead said over there. I know what's right. I know what's best for this country. And instead of X, we're going to do Y. So it is very clear at this point, we are on the verge of seeing a major U.S. geopolitical strategy shift. And I think for a lot of people, they're going to say it's about time, because as these wars have been grinding on and grinding on and grinding on to no success, and atrocity after atrocity, war crime after war crime, people are just saying, this can't go on like this. Well, apparently, Donald Trump agreed. It can't go on like this. Now, this doesn't mean we're looking at a time of total peace here, because they're still talking about a potential war against North Korea. They're definitely talking about war against Iran. In fact, somebody just sent me this propaganda piece from an obvious hoax news site that Iran had fired on the U.S. aircraft carrier which just entered the Gulf. And it really didn't make sense. And I went on out and I could not find any confirmation. So there's a lot of propaganda out there. Got to be really, really, really careful. But one good thing about Mattis' exit, it takes the leash off of Trump's America First doctrine. More about this when we come back from commercials. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And as I was starting to say before the commercial break, one good thing about James Mattis leaving is it takes the leash off of Trump's America First doctrine. And this is coming out of an article that's in Bloomberg. And basically is confirming that people like Jim Mattis were being counted on to control Donald Trump, to hold firm against the America First doctrine. And now that last line of defense is gone. So his abrupt resignation as defense secretary and Trump's rapid-fire moves to reshape the U.S. military footprint abroad are provoking fears. There's no one left to restrain the president's isolationist impulses. Well, somebody is not really remembering the way this country is supposed to work. We, the American people, voted for Donald Trump because he said he was going to get us out of all these wars. In fact, that was probably the campaign promise that he made that was most important to most people. It certainly was important to me. And now it looks like he's starting to do it. And apparently the attitude of the interventionists and the war hawks is, well, who cares what the people think? We know what's best for this country. We have to have more wars all over. Now, to give you an idea about Mattis, the corporate media has been lauding him to the skies. What a terrible loss it is for the government. And he does have an impressive background. He's a 4-star general, decorated war veteran. He was leading forces in Iraq and Afghanistan. And he was chief of U.S. CENTCOM until 2013, when he retired amid disagreements with the White House over its foreign policy in the Middle East. Now, the Marine Corps Times has since dubbed him the most revered Marine in a generation, which, well, Smedley Butler was the last generation. And some of the things Mattis has said are just amazing. This is one of his more famous quotes. Be polite, be professional, but have a plan to kill everybody you meet. Another one of his quotes is, there are some people who think you have to hate them in order to shoot them. I don't think you do. It's just business. And then he actually got into trouble for this one. You go into Afghanistan, you got guys who slap women around for 5 years because they didn't wear a veil. You know, guys like that ain't got no manhood left anyway, so it's a hell of a lot of fun to shoot them. Actually, it's quite fun to fight them, you know. It's a hell of a hoot. It's fun to shoot some people. The first time you blow someone away is not an insignificant event. That said, there are just some sphincters in the world that just need to be shot. Of course, he didn't use the word sphincters. And I like this one here. He actually said one time, PowerPoint makes us stupid. So he's definitely a piece of work. All right, we're going to go to the phones now to Peter in Los Angeles. Aloha, Peter. Welcome to the show. What is on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. Happy winter solstice.
Yeah, Mike, this is a great week. I think what's happening here. I mean, Mattis is gone. No matter what you said, he's got to put it to Bolton. But, Bolton's is Sheldon Adelson's boy, and Trump's pulling out of Syria. That must make Bolton apoplectic that he went against Sheldon Adelson. So then draw down in Afghanistan, half the troops leaving there, facing up to a governmental shutdown on the principle over the border, which I also agree with. The Weekly Standard went under. That's great news.
Yes.
This has been a really good, and France is still rebelling. I love it.
I do too. It feels like we're on the cusp of some really dramatic changes in the world for 2019.
Yeah, well, I mean, the very fact that finally, after 2 years, he's living up to his campaign promises. And better late than never. Good for him. I'm supporting him. As long as the border gets closed and we get out of these wars, I'm cool with him.
Well, I know I'm getting a lot of emails here. Basically, people are they're energized about Trump now. Trump should have done this before the midterms, and then the Republicans might have actually kept the House of Representatives. Yeah,
definitely, and it would have labeled. Not that they aren't to anybody who's watching, anyways. Would have labeled the Democrats the party of war, which they are.
Which is amazing because, when I was much younger, the Democrats always came across as the anti-war party. It was the Republicans are the warmongers. The Republicans want wars all over. And, we Democrats, we're peace and light and we're hippies and, and we have the summer of love and the autumn of gonorrhea. And it was all that stuff, along with the creeping socialism. But it's amazing that both sides, despite the obvious enmity between themselves, they've actually sort of mutated to pretty much the same position on so many aspects of our current society, including the war policy.
Well, it's great news, Mike, and maybe we finally have a president finally, but. These trends are great. Listen, I wanted to ask you, what's your schedule for next week? And Merry Christmas, by the way, to you and Claire.
Merry Christmas to you as well. We get Monday and Tuesday off, and then we'll be back live Wednesday through Friday. Then we get the following Monday and Tuesday off, which is New Year's Eve, New Year's Day, and we'll be back the Wednesday of that week. So, and obviously, I'm hoping nothing really important happens during that, but we will be maintaining the What Really Happened website during that period. So if something significant happens, you can always go over there and see what our commentary and analysis about that is there. But Claire and I do need the rest. It's been a really rough year on the two of us on so many different fronts, and we just need to veg for a while. We're not even going out. We don't want to even be on the roads during any of this stuff.
I hear that. Well, Merry Christmas to you, Mike, and give Claire a hug, and Merry Christmas to everybody out there, and let's hope that, let's wish for peace on earth and goodwill toward men and go from there.
Absolutely. And, it's funny. My whole life, every Christmas, we say that because it came out of Charles Dickens, and peace on earth, goodwill to men. This winter, this particular time, all of a sudden it's taking on a whole new meaning because unfortunately we have not had a lot of peace on earth, and we don't seem to see a lot of goodwill between people, especially coming from the liberal snowflakes. All righty, we're going to switch over here to Al in Canada. Aloha, Al. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, that Mattis guy, he's a real psychopath, isn't he?
From some of the quotes that he's said, yeah, absolutely.
That is just disgusting. I cannot believe that guy is still walking free. He's basically, from those quotes those quotes, he has basically said, you know what, I've committed murder.
No, he's
cold-blooded
committed war.
Murder.
He's committed war.
Well,
Once you label it as a war or a conflict, nobody gets charged with murder.
Yeah. Well, it's to me, it's the same thing.
I agree. To me, the same thing.
You know what? I cannot. I had no idea, Mike. I had no idea until you just said those three quotes.
Yeah.
My blood pressure just shot up about 20 or 30 points. You know what I mean?
Well, you know,
the guy's a psychopath.
Mattis committed war crimes in Fallujah. Everybody knows that.
Yeah, well, I remember that, but you know, like you forget these things over time, right?
Yeah.
And then luckily we have people like you to remind us of this stuff, because that guy is a certified psychopath. It's fun to kill people? Really? I wonder how he would feel if the shoe was on the other foot and he was the one running. Would he still think it was fun?
Actually, there was another quote that he had that said how great it was to be shot at and have it miss, that it was a wonderful feeling. Now, again, one context you need to keep in mind is that a lot of these quotes were being said by him to his troops to try and build them up and motivate them to do the job he wanted them to do. It's kind of like Patton's famous speech that was recreated by George C. Scott at the opening of that movie. You know, it's rallying the troops. So, you know, a little bit of excess is understandable there. But yeah, it does seem like there's a little bit of craziness out there.
Yeah, you know what, Trump, like you've been saying, it's like Peter just said, it's about time. You know what? I don't know about you, Mike, but he's redeemed himself. In my opinion, that guy has redeemed himself.
You know, I think it's a little premature to put the bunting up just yet. We have to see if this actually is carried through to completion. And again, there was that comment about wanting to focus on Iran and North Korea and Russia and China. And so it may be less a move toward peace and disengagement and more a situation of having to reallocate resources because they really don't have enough resources to keep all of these wars in all of these countries going along.
Well, Mike, didn't Trump tweet out like a week or so ago something about like this military buildup has to end because it's crazy or something like that?
Yes.
Yeah. So, you know, maybe things will change. I mean, you know, I appreciate you throwing caution to the wind, but maybe it'll change. You know, we need it. We need this change in the United States. I mean, Mike, Western society is we're bankrupt. I mean, there's no getting around it. And the IMF has warned. We're worried. You're like, geez, look at the stock market.
Oh yeah,
that's the canary, right?
Yeah, the money junkies did not get their Friday happy ending.
Oh yeah. By the way, what was it? I didn't even check yet. Or is it up or down? Or
oh, it was down. The Dow closed down something like 414, I think.
Yeah. It's 2008 all over again, isn't it?
Yes, it is. 2019, I'm afraid, is going to be a very rough year.
Yeah, you know what? All the people are saying, "Oh, now's the time to buy." Yeah, right. The poor people can't buy because they just lost their shirt. You know, pensions and everything else, right?
Yep.
Oh, I appreciate your time, Mike. You have a good one. Say hello
all right,
to Claire.
Thanks an awful lot. I mean, look at all those people. First of all, if you have credit cards or mortgage or car loan with a variable interest rate, those rates are going up because the Fed is jumping them up. And as the stock market goes down, the 401ks are emptying out. So I'll tell you what, next week we're going to talk about our prognostications for 2019 because this is going into Christmas here. All right, let's take a phone call from Paul in New Jersey. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. Michael, today's Frank Zappa's birthday, by the way, and so it's same with Macron. Both share the same birthday today, this winter solstice.
Okay.
Yesterday you made a great point at the beginning of your show talking about Trump claiming about Syria, like declaring victory and leaving. And I appreciate that. I'm happy he did that. If it floats our boats and makes everybody happy and we believe it, that's a great way to end conflicts, is just to say, hey, we won, let's come home.
Yes.
But what is a disturbing trend going on there is I got to admit, it's at InfoWars. and it has to do with them being associated with the color revolution in Iran. Because as we know, InfoWars has been outlawed in Iran, and it's because InfoWars is basically promoting the Restart movement, who was basically based on a rather odd Iranian immigrant who lives in Los Angeles, made his money doing game shows in Iran.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, his name is Hosseini. He's been quoted as saying they should burn down government mosques and police stations. This is over at Bloomberg News Service, linked through Wikipedia.
Yeah.
So the Restart Iran founder, this Hosseini, is quoted as promoting violence against Iranian and urging that against government mosques and police stations.
Yeah, they're going to try. They're going to retry what they tried to do in 2009 and failed, and they figure we've all forgotten about how the U.S. government tried to bring down the legitimate government of Iran in 2009 and botched it. So yeah, they're clearly getting ready to try again. We have a story about Iran. Apparently, the U.S. consulate there is in a little bit of hot water over a video, but we'll talk about that in a little bit.
Yeah, but InfoWars is using, and Alex Jones using their site almost like a CIA op, trying to, take over and topple the Iranian government with Restart as an internet movement in Iran. And I think it's really dishonorable of Alex Jones to associate and do color revolutions. I mean, is he just our George Soros? I mean, does the Trumpians, they want to topple the Iranian government, part of the neocon agenda for the final nation on Wesley Clark's hit list?
Well, you need to remember something about Alex Jones and whether or not he's now working with intelligence agencies. I have no way of knowing. But it's no secret that Alex Jones is a supporter of Israel. In fact, it's the reason why he and I don't talk to each other anymore. There was even a video, it's on YouTube, from early in his career where he's just at the microphone saying, I'm a supporter of Israel, I believe in Israel, and Israel wants Iran's government brought down so they can basically smash Iran up the way they did Iraq and remove it as a political challenger in the Mideast. Anyway, listen, Paul, got to take another commercial break. Got to let you go. We'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And just as soon as Trump came out with his announcement on Syria, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu got on the phone and said, "What are you doing?" And apparently tried to persuade Trump to walk back on his decision. And of course, it didn't work. Trump is standing firm. And Netanyahu is saying that Trump's move is met with significant disappointment, according to Israeli media here. And Israel's political figures are saying that Trump's decision represents a possible blow to regional security. The region wasn't secure. Everybody was shooting at everybody. That's not security. Security is everybody making things, trade, growing things, peace through commerce. Israel's politicians are saying that Trump has left the Jewish state to single-handedly combat the threat posed by the Iranian presence in the embattled country. So Netanyahu is still out there saying that, we got to get Iran. Well, you have to get Iran. You have to kill them for us here. And in Netanyahu's public remarks, he said he'd spoken with both Trump and Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, who made it clear they had other ways to express their influence in the arena. One way is economic development. Maybe Trump is learning a lesson from Russia and China, who are expanding their spheres of influence, not through war and conquest, but through building infrastructure, making deals. helping these countries grow rather than knocking them back to the Stone Age. So Netanyahu is now out there saying that he plans to escalate the fight against Iran in Syria after the U.S. exit. This is going to be interesting to see with the Russians still there with their S-300 and S-400 missiles. And by the way, it looks like Israel has sort of been keeping its aircraft in its own territory ever since the air defense systems were boosted by Russia. And don't forget the story we had yesterday where Russia is now green-lighting that if Israel attacks Syria, Syria will reciprocate with an attack on a similar facility, airport, factory, what have you, inside Israel. So that could flare up because Israel is a belligerent nation. They can't seem to go 6 months without blowing something up. Now, Netanyahu, it was out there, he's boasting about Israel's success in countering the Iranian threat by targeting Hezbollah, which he claims is backed by Iran, and says the whole world needs us. The IDF is the only army fighting the Iranians. Okay, well, Benny, no, the whole world does not need you, and it's time to stop fighting. We'll be right back after station identification. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Now, another area where Donald Trump is starting to look presidential has to do with the border wall standoff in Congress over the spending bill. And Trump is standing firm on that. Now, yesterday, the House of Representatives passed a new spending bill that included $5 billion for the border wall. But the Senate is expected to vote it down because the Senate requires 60 votes to pass the bill, and all 49 Democrats in the Senate are voting against it. And so Trump is holding meetings. The Senate has had some procedural votes. They're waiting for some senators to try and get back there to attend the session. Apparently, some had taken off early for Christmas. Now they're flying on back, trying to get to the Capitol building here. But Donald Trump is out there saying that if the Democrats in the Senate vote no on this new spending bill, there will be a shutdown, and it will last for a very long time. We're talking like a month or more. Now, he's asked Mitch McConnell to use the nuclear option, and Mitch came on back and said he doesn't have the support for that. The nuclear option would have reduced the Senate vote to a simple majority to pass the bill. They're always changing the rules over there. Now, Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, they're whining about Trump shutting down the government. It isn't Trump who's shutting down the government. It's the Democrats. It's the open border people. They've created an impasse. Donald Trump campaigned on closing the border. He wants to keep that promise to you, the American people who voted for him, to shut down that border. And the Democrats, who are desperate for more illegal immigrants because they'll vote Democrat, are fighting tooth and nail to prevent that. So it's going to be the Democrats who are going to shut down the government. Because if you think about it, on the vast scale of government spending, $5 billion just isn't all that much. If you look at defense spending or that $800 billion farm bill, or all the trillions that we've spent on all these wars, $5 billion to Washington, D.C. is pocket change. They could probably find it underneath some of those couch cushions in the Capitol building. This is all about Pelosi and Schumer wanting to block Donald Trump from accomplishing anything he promised the American people so they can campaign on it in 2020. And to heck with the damage it causes to the nation or the American people, we just don't matter to them anymore. It's all about keeping score and thumping of the chests. Now, Pelosi is getting personal. It's very unseemly for a member of Congress, in my opinion. but apparently she came out with a comment saying that Trump wants the shutdown because it means he can play more golf. So they're out there trash talking the president, and they're going to insist that it was Trump who shut down the government. It isn't. It's the Democrats who refuse to vote for the spending bill because they don't want a border wall. Now, Representative Eric Swalwell, who's a Democrat from California, is actually saying that allowing the government to be shut down is justification for invoking the 25th Amendment by which Trump could be removed from office. Now, it's not that simple. It's a very complex process. A lot of people have to sign on saying they don't think the president is able to do his job. Well, the president is doing his job. He's just dealing with obstructionists, and every president has had obstructionists here. Okay, we're going to go back to the phones here. We've got a caller waiting. Jim in Chicago, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. I am not a big fan of Trump. I never voted for him, and 99% of times I don't support him. But in this particular case, I give him a lot of credit for taking our soldiers out of Syria. We had no business being there to begin with. And for him to suggest he's going to take soldiers out of Afghanistan, that's long overdue. So he will get my support for that. But I still am concerned the fact that he continues to lie a lot, which is, well, most politicians do. I think the current House, well, I should say the Democrats, when they get into office next year, they're going to investigate his finances and other things, which might show that this guy is crooked. There's things that he did that most Americans did not appreciate, and they did not know about that while he was running. So I think
there's absolutely no question. There's no question that when the new House of Representatives is seated on the 3rd, they're first of all, they've already announced they're going to shut down all the investigations into the FBI and the Department of Justice, and they're going to focus totally on Donald Trump. They're basically saying they're gunning for Donald Trump. And so I'm glad he's finally putting on those presidential brass knuckles, because he is going to need them.
Oh, I would agree. You're right about that. But again, I'm the type of person, if you're doing a good thing, I will support you. But if I think you're doing something shady, I'm going to come after you. So Donald Trump, I don't know if he did this to make people think he's a good president or going to be a good president by taking the soldiers out. I don't know. But, you're familiar with Wag the Dog.
Yeah, I am very much with that. And like I said earlier in the program, Claire and I are going to be talking about his possible motivations in hour number 3 of our program. And I don't want to jump the gun on it, because Claire and I have some differing opinions on exactly what is going down. But, the fact of the matter is, with all the laws that we have in this country, anybody who's investigated sufficiently, they'll find something. It's impossible to live your life in this country without breaking some law somewhere. And if you got the political juice, the government looks the other way, like they did with Hillary Clinton and the Clinton Foundation and various other deep state operatives. And if you're on the outs with them, they'll just focus in. And you're right. Sooner or later, they're going to find something on Donald Trump, because you can find something on anybody, because we live in a country with so many laws. It's impossible to get through life without being in violation of one or the other. It's just simply impossible.
I would agree with that. Finally, $5 billion is not a lot of money when you think about it. I think you mentioned yesterday that Ted Cruz stated, the money that El Chapo has, $15 billion. Why don't we use that money to build a wall?
Yeah,
Ted give Mexico and Central America $10.8 billion.
Okay, your phone connection is breaking up for some reason. I'm not sure exactly why, but Ted Cruz did have a good idea. The U.S. government, under RICO, basically confiscated, I think it was something like $17 billion from El Chapo, and presuming the money has not already been spent over at the Pentagon, use part of that to build a border wall.
I would agree. And like you stated the other day, why are we giving $10.8 billion to Mexico and Central America for to build their security and for people to get jobs? I don't understand that at all.
No, I don't understand that at all. $10.8 billion, we could take off $5.8 billion of that. That's the wall right there, and still have $5 billion left over for job creation for legal American citizens in this country.
Right, right. Well, Michael, I'm going to let you go. You and Claire have a nice weekend and a nice Merry Christmas to you.
Merry Christmas to you as well. And we're going to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. Now, by now, you've probably heard about this triple amputee, Purple Heart winner veteran who started a GoFundMe page to raise money for the border wall. And as I understand it, it's already gone over $1 million. And here's what's really interesting. Apparently, there's a Washington Post columnist, or actually a reporter, Tony Rahm, and he literally went over to GoFundMe and tried to get this GoFundMe page shut down, and said there's apparently it's $8 million in donations. Boy, there's a message. And so Rahm went on over and said, something like that, can it be allowed on the site? And GoFundMe's management said, yeah, actually it can. So this guy at the Washington Post was trying to shut down, because it isn't the fact that the GoFundMe page exists. It's the fact that it's raising all this money so rapidly, which is telegraphing that the American people want that wall. They want the border secured. They want the illegal immigrants kicked on out. And more about that a little bit later in the program after the economic news here. Now, 2 senators are trying to, once again, sneak that legislation that would impose criminal penalties on American companies and groups that support a boycott of Israel into this spending package that would avert the government shutdown by Friday. It's called a must-pass bill. And when you have a bill that everybody knows is going to pass because it has to pass, those are the ones that get all these riders. And by the way, in the blueprint for the New America, that's absolutely forbidden. Bills are written for a single purpose. That whole thing about a bill to do this and other purposes goes away. No more riders. So Senator Ben Cardin, who's a Maryland Democrat, and Senator Rob Portman, an Ohio Republican, are pushing for this proposal that would create criminal and civil penalties for American entities that back boycotts supporting Palestinian rights. This is coming out of the New York Times. And they're still trying to attach this provision to a package of spending bills that they're presuming that one way or the other the Senate is going to pass today, or eventually, to avoid the government shutdown. So here's something to think about. The U.S. government is on the verge of a shutdown, and these clowns are still fretting about Israel and BDS and Palestine. You can see where their priorities are. No government can serve 2 masters. No politician can serve 2 masters. And politicians who serve Israel cannot, do not, and will not serve the American people, and this is a good example of that. Okay? Apparently, Democrat Luis Gutierrez was on TV just frothing at the mouth, raging about people saying Merry Christmas. We ought to rename this guy to Ebenezer Gutierrez. He actually came out with the comment that Donald Trump would have killed Jesus. Well, I don't think so. And you know what's really funny is back during the campaign in 2016, when they were coming up with all of these completely fantastical accusations against Trump, I made a bunch of satire posters about how Donald Trump did this, Donald Trump did that, and one of them actually said he personally nailed Jesus to the cross here. And then Gutierrez went on about how Trump disrespected a woman, Kirsten Nielsen, by walking out on her while she was responding to his rant. Actually, she was kind of ranting herself at the time. James Comey, as you know, has had 2 sessions behind closed doors before the House committee. And I'm sure he's just relaxed at running out the clock, because as soon as the new Congress comes in, he's off the hook. The investigations are going to be shut down. But some interesting tidbits are coming out of it. And in testimony, James Comey admitted that when he briefed then President-elect Donald Trump about the Steele dossier, Comey did not inform Trump that it was paid for by the Democrats. He left out that little detail. Now, that's particularly relevant since the embattled former FBI director admitted in testimony 2 weeks ago that he was aware that the dossier authored by former British spy Christopher Steele was financed by Democrats who opposed Trump. Frankly, that one issue alone justified his firing. Over in France, the death toll in the French Yellow Vest protest has risen to 9. This one was an accident. A man aged about 60 was hit by a truck near a motorway where demonstrators had been gathering. Doesn't seem like it was intentional. It was just a tragic accident. When you have a lot of people on those roadways, things happen. There's an interesting article. This came out of Brass Check saying what's really happening in France. And it's saying the media loves to focus on the violence in Paris because it makes the Yellow Vests look bad. But the real action is across the entire country. And it's been peaceful, not to mention devastatingly effective. The French government was brought to its knees in just 1 week. And of course, the corporate media isn't going to report on that. They don't want you slaves to get uppity ideas that the same thing could happen here, even though there's going to be a Yellow Vest protest in California. I think this coming spring is going to be the spring of the Yellow Vests. I don't think this is going to go away. The corporate media is going to be out there trying to portray the Yellow Vests. Oh, they're bad people. They're committing violence. Probably the violence is being committed by hired agent provocateurs. I remember when we had some protests here in Honolulu against the Iraq War, and they were just getting started for the parade, and the organizers were there saying, there are going to be agent provocateurs trying to start violence. And do not help them. In fact, stand around them and point at them and say, this is the guy committing acts of violence, and point them out to the police, who, of course, are going to do nothing because the agent provocateurs are working for them, but at least it gets them off the street for a little while. And you have to basically admire the French spirit, the joie de vivre. There's a video of protesters dancing to the music of Edith Piaf, who's a French music icon. And basically, French spirit, you got to admire that one. Now, we mentioned this earlier, but we're going to mention it again. French security forces are getting ready to deploy this last resort chemical weapon to keep protesters away from key buildings. And it's apparently a powder weapon. The dispensers can spread it across an area the size of 6 soccer pitches in just 10 seconds. And it's a chemical weapon. Macron is deploying chemical weapons against his own people. So, hey, Donald, fire up those cruise missiles. You launched 2 cruise missile attacks on unproven accusations Assad was using chemical weapons on his people. We've got video this time. So the protests have run 5 straight weeks, and unfortunately, I disagree with the targeting and destruction of France's historical monuments like the Arc de Triomphe, because it does look bad, and because it is defacing history. But again, I think the people who are inciting the violence are working for the government, because that's a very old, very slimy propaganda trick that governments like to use. Now, the United States has approved a Patriot missile sale worth $3.5 billion to Turkey. And this is an effort to try and win Turkey back from their plan to buy the S-400 missiles from Russia. And there's a lot of arm twisting going on. But apparently the U.S. it's a steep discount, and it will include 80 Patriot missiles, 60 PAC-3 missiles, missile interceptors, and the related hardware. And they're trying to get Turkey to come on back in. And Turkey may do it, not because the Patriot is superior to the S-400, because it isn't, but because he's now probably feeling obligated to Donald Trump for getting the U.S. forces out of the way of Erdogan's planned expedition into northeast Syria. And I don't think Assad is going to put up much of resistance, because the Kurds have been a problem for Syria as well. Okay, we got to take another break for commercials, and we'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And almost as soon as Trump had made his announcement about pulling U.S. forces out of Syria, saying we had defeated ISIS, the Kurdish-led forces claim there was a huge ISIS assault in southeast Syria. And they're claiming that ISIS launched a major attack on Syrian Democratic Forces positions in Hajin regions in southeastern Syria. Well, the Syrian Democratic Forces are not part of the Syrian government. They are one of the U.S.-backed rebel groups here. So if it did happen, let them fight each other and the problem gets solved here. But it feels to me like this was a propaganda gambit to try and force Trump to reverse his stance on pulling out of Syria. Because the people who want those wars, they play dirty. I mean, remember some of those quotes from Mattis. These are people who do not have the moral compass of ordinary Americans. Yeah, we'll solve our problems. We'll shoot them all. You know, we want the war. We'll lie to get it. And we've been told some whoppers to get into wars. Saddam's nuclear weapons. The Lusitania wasn't carrying weapons, honest. Pearl Harbor was a surprise, really. Okay, apparently up at the United Nations, there is evidence being presented by the Foundation for the Study of Democracy about the activities of the White Helmets in Syria. Now, the White Helmets have been presented to us by the corporate media as the good guys, that they are there, they're an aid group, and that it's always the White Helmets who are providing photo and video evidence of Assad's supposed atrocities, most of which, in fact, all of which usually turns out to have been faked. And the evidence being presented at the UN is showing they're not humanitarian rescue workers. In fact, they're terrorists and looters. They're just an extension of jihadist militants. Apparently, there are accusations of organ harvesting, because black market organ trading is a source of huge amounts of money. And it's being put forward the White Helmet should be designated a terrorist organization. Alrighty, things are getting tense over in the Azov Sea. Russia has moved one of their missile frigates towards the Azov Sea. There's all this talk about Ukraine getting ready to try and basically crash on through the Kerch Straits without going through the protocol of informing Russia 48 hours in advance. And Russia doesn't say no, they're just trying to manage the traffic over there. But then we had all this talk about Ukraine wants to go on in, and they want international cooperation. They want NATO to be there with them. They want warships and to just go on in and prove that the Sea of Azov is international waters and not Russian territorial waters. It's part of a larger plan, I think, to try and recapture Crimea away from the Russian republics, and that could really get World War III going for real. But Russia is moving this missile frigate toward the Kerch Strait, and it looks like it looks like Russia's getting ready to basically say, no, you'd better all behave. What I don't like about this article, which was in the Express in Great Britain, is it has this line: tensions are high in the area after Vladimir Putin's warships opened fire on 3 Ukrainian ships in the Black Sea on November 25th. Well, those were warning shots. Those Ukrainian ships were not hit by any kind of gunfire. One of them was rammed because they were refusing a legitimate order to basically stop and explain why they were there. Now, if Poroshenko is going to start causing mischief in the Sea of Azov or Crimea or the Donbass, and he's been making all these statements about we're going to liberate the Donbass. Well, Donbass is already liberated. They liberated themselves from Kiev. But apparently, as it becomes more and more obvious, there is a major war coming in the Donbass region. Ukrainian soldiers are basically deserting, and they're flooding into the European Union and Russia because they don't want to fight this war. And part of it, of course, is the fact that war is a very nasty, poorly paying business, and you can lose parts of your body. But the other part of it is that these Ukrainians do not want to be shooting at their fellow Ukrainians. That was one of the major problems that has plagued Poroshenko all along, is that from the point of view of the ordinary soldiers, they don't see those breakaway Eastern republics as really foreign countries. It's just other parts of the world that have the same people that they themselves are. All right, we're coming up here on another commercial break, and we'll be back after these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And one of our listeners just emailed me. Apparently, the GoFundMe page for building Trump's wall has reached $13 million. There is a message there from the American people. And I think if the Democrats don't pay attention, they may be in for a disappointment come 2020. Even with all the vote rigging and the illegal immigrant votes. And again, Trump now has 2 years to clean up that election system and get a national voter ID law through. Now, of course, the House of Representatives is going to vote it down, Democrat controlled, but at least make them stand up and say, showing an ID to vote is racist and exclusive. You got to show an ID to drive a car. You got to show an ID to buy alcohol or tobacco. You got to show an ID for a lot of stuff. That's not racist. Anyway, we mentioned this earlier. Apparently, the U.S. mission in Saudi Arabia was sharing a video promoting nonviolent protest against government. And when the Saudi Arabia said, what the heck is going on, they yanked the video here. It was Saudi Arabia, not Iran. All righty, we're going to take phone call. Steve in West Virginia, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. Can you hear me good?
I hear you fine.
Okay. I don't know. I just got on your show today and just now, and I don't know if it's been put out or if you've talked about it already, but you just shared now, not only are they pulling out all the troops, but they're sending all the aircraft carriers home, back to port.
No, they're not sending the aircraft carriers home. They're stopping the air campaign in Syria. And I would imagine that the carriers that are currently off the coast of Syria will be redeployed elsewhere. But with so many of our carriers that are in port for maintenance or refueling, I'm sure those carriers will be sent somewhere interesting.
Okay, because I heard that they're actually sending them back to the United States, but
where did you hear that?
His report on a website called the Israeli News Live. It's actually, they're fairly accurate. Guy's got a lot of subscribers, but He just reported that about. I just heard it about 15 minutes ago. But either way, I mean, it doesn't look like they're going to talk Trump out of pulling these people out.
No, he's definitely standing firm. But of course, they could try some kind of a false flag attack or Assad gassing his people again. But I think maybe Donald Trump has realized that he has been snookered by his own advisors. And with the revelation that Comey neglected to tell him that the Christopher Steele dossier was paid for by the Democrats, I think Trump just woke up to the fact the people around him are lying to him to control him. And that's why I said earlier in the show, I'm expecting there are going to be a lot of staffing changes at the highest levels of the administration in the coming months.
Mike, I just want to point out one thing. You say there could be a false flag attack, but he's made an agreement with Erdogan and Putin and all those guys, and I do not believe that the CIA has the ability over Putin and Erdogan to do a false flag attack without getting caught. Erdogan, just nailed them to the wall with the Khashoggi thing, and they're not going to let him pull a false flag. I mean, how are they going to do it? They don't have the ability to do it.
Oh, yes, they do. Do not underestimate the Central Intelligence Agency. And history is full of examples where the CIA just went out on its own and did something without congressional approval or any kind of oversight. And a good example of that, of course, would be the Iran-Contra operation in the 1980s, which included that gun and drug running operation out of the Clintons' Arkansas down to Nicaragua and back.
Yeah, I understand that's a while ago, but the people see right through these false flags now. They know they're happening. They're reported by you and a lot of other citizen journalists on the web right away, and people.
I wouldn't rule it out. I'm sorry, I'm not going to rule it out. These people are desperate. And they may be saying, well, some people will think it's a false flag, but as long as we get the majority of Americans fooled, we can go ahead. And if they make it something really big, it tends to fool more people. The mechanism of the so-called big lie. The bigger and more spectacular a lie is, the more people want to believe it.
But don't you think that Turkey and Putin have better control of the Middle East than the CIA? The CIA is garbage.
Again, I think you're.
CIA is a piece of garbage.
I think you're underestimating the CIA. I really do. They're very dangerous, and they're in total control of our media. Well, not total control. Israel's in there as well. But yeah, don't underestimate the Central Intelligence Agency. They are bad dudes. What can I tell you? Anyway, thank you for the phone call. We're going to let you go. Now, as we look around the world, we find out there are a lot of protests going on. And remember when I said that this push to create a global government created a political climate conducive to a global revolution? And there's a lot of stuff going on. Over in Sudan, there are demonstrations across the entire nation, including the capital Khartoum, over the rising food prices and economic mismanagement. And apparently people took to the country after Friday prayers to demonstrate against the government. They were met with gunfire. And the culmination of all these rallies resulted in Sudan declaring a state of emergency in several cities and schools being closed until further notice. So a lot of stuff going on there. Over in India, there's a major protest going on. And this has to do with separatists who, like Crimea, want to break away. And apparently on December 15th, there was a gun battle that broke out between security forces and separatist rebels in Karpura Sirnu, a village in the Pulwama district. 4 people were killed there. Hundreds of people then poured into the street to protest in support of the separatist rebels. Some of them started throwing stones at the security forces, who then opened fire on them. over in Spain. Riots are breaking out in Catalonia against the government of Spain, and riot police are using rubber bullets at the pro-independence protesters who are protesting Spanish government cabinet meeting in Barcelona. So it's pretty much everywhere here. Okay. A U.S. software company has blocked the fundraising account of the Palestinian-led boycott movement following a complaint by a pro-Israel advocacy group. Now, the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement denounced the move as McCarthyite. They're absolutely right. And according to this report, DonorBox, which makes fundraising management software, confirmed that the BDS campaign's account was temporarily blocked while it investigates allegations made by Sharat Hadin, an organization that specializes in law attacks on Palestine solidarity campaigns. Now, Associated Press said the complaint was submitted in coordination with Israel's Strategic Affairs Ministry, which is their Ministry of Propaganda here. Now, as you know, Tuesday is Christmas. A lot of people want to get into Bethlehem. And Bethlehem is in the occupied Palestinian territories. It's not actually in Israel, but Israel controls much of the tourism. They keep the tourists from staying at Palestinian hotels. They keep the tourists from shopping in Palestinian souvenir shops. And most importantly, they keep the tourists from hearing the Palestinian narrative about what's going on in Israel. So they keep a tight control. Now, in order for Gazans to visit Bethlehem, it requires a special permit from the government of Israel. And apparently there's a lot of anger because the permits being issued have age restrictions. This year, 500 permits were approved by Israel, but they're for people over the age of 55 and between the ages of 16 and 35. Children under the age of 16 were not included in getting the permit, so they have to stay home. The families are being split up. Or they have to just simply decide we're not going to go after all. Now, extreme right-wing Israeli member of the Knesset, Bezalel Smotrich, has called for illegal Jewish settlers to attack Palestinians, claiming that the life of Jews is more valuable than Palestinians' life. And he wrote this on his Twitter account: "I call on my heroic settler friends and pioneers to come out tonight and close Route 60 along its entire length to the movement of Arab vehicles. If there are Palestinian resistance attacks against illegal Jewish settlers, there will be no Arabs on the roads. Our lives precede their quality of life." Now, the Israeli human rights organization Yesh Din demanded that an investigation be opened into this guy for basically inciting violence against the Palestinians, because you can't incite violence against the Palestinians without it flashing back on the people of Israel. And after all, this is supposed to be the holy season. We just had Hanukkah. Now we've got Christmas. Everybody calm down and enjoy this time of year, because 2019 is probably going to be really rough. Okay, do you remember SodaStream? SodaStream is this product where it's a bottle with a carbon dioxide charger, don't tell Al Gore, that makes soda water. And then you put in these little flavorings to create your own soda drinks in your home. Orange soda, cola soda, root beer, a whole bunch of flavors. I don't know. I'm not interested. There was actually a predecessor to this, all the way back in the 1970s, and we had one, and it was terrible. Anyway, very popular product. It's all over the place. Everyone's saying, oh, get one for Christmas. And originally, they were making these things in a factory in one of the illegal settlements over in the West Bank, which led to worldwide criticism and, in many cases, a boycott. People just were not buying these. Well, SodaStream has figured out a way where they can get away from that. They're going to open a factory in Gaza, and they're setting up their plant in Rahat, which is north of Beersheba in the Negev desert, and they're basically going to be creating jobs. And the plant will be operated through a subcontractor. But I think that's a good thing, and it shows that the boycotts are actually working. Over the last several days, we have seen articles in the Western press, primarily the United States and Great Britain, accusing China of hacking in and stealing all kinds of things here. And we already knew that that charge was bovine excrement, because anybody who understands cybercrime and computer security understands that all the cyber criminals need to do, all the hackers need to do, is just hop from machines in one country to a machine in another country to a machine in another country to finally a machine in China, carry out their attacks, and then shut down all the links and skedaddle. And so Beijing is now accusing the United States of fabricating its claims that China stole trade secrets and technologies from at least 12 countries through this hacking campaign, and countered by claiming that Washington, D.C. itself is guilty of cyber hacking. Well, yeah, what do you think they do over at the NSA? So the foreign ministry in Beijing responded that the United States fabricated facts. The U.S. made false accusations against the Chinese side on the grounds of so-called cyber stealing. Such a move is a serious violation of the basic norms of international relations and will seriously damage Sino-U.S. cooperation. Well, the trade war isn't helping, and sending in American warships and bombers to those islands in the South China Sea isn't helping either. But as Trump himself said, when explaining his pullout from Syria, they need to focus on the new Cold Wars with Russia and China. And Cold Wars are a money-making scam. That's one of the reasons why all these weapons being produced by the U.S. military-industrial complex are junk. They're overpriced junk, but they're junk. The scam is, oh, we're never really going to see them get used. All these ICBMs and these nuclear bombers and everything, you know, we'll fly them around the air shows and, you know, people will look at them and admire them, but, you know, they're never really going to have to see combat, so we can value engineer them, make lots and lots of money. They pulled this scam through the 1950s and the 1960s, and the American people, my parents' generation, they fell for it hook, line, and sinker. Oh, the commies are coming to get us. The commies are coming to get us. The Chinese are coming to get us. Don't be your parents. Don't be your grandparents. Understand what this talk of a Cold War is really all about. And remember all the times during the Cold War that it almost got hot. Once at the Cuban Missile Crisis, and one other time entirely by accident due to a malfunctioning piece of equipment that led some of the people in one of these military bases controlling the nuclear missiles to think there was a Russian attack. And fortunately, there was a human being in the loop who said, this does not make sense. And he pulled the plug, which brings me back to my other concern right now about all these modern computerized weapons, which could act before any human could intervene. That's why the USS Vincennes shot down that Iranian passenger jet years ago. That's what killed TWA-800, putting these weapons under computer control with software that has bugs in it, makes mistakes. That could turn a Cold War hot very, very quickly. By the way, according to the New York Times, Russia now controls the minds of African Americans. Ooh. Going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Turning to our local politics here, top Senate Democrats are now targeting President Trump's pick for the next Attorney General, William Barr, over concerns that Barr will not support the Mueller investigation. And apparently the Democrats are also upset that acting Attorney General Matt Whitaker does not have to recuse himself from overseeing the probe into Russia and anything else Mueller feels like, despite the fact that Whitaker has repeatedly criticized it. Well, that investigation should be gotten rid of. They've spent a huge amount of money and a lot of time, and they came up with zip about this Russia collusion situation. They found nothing, nada. It's a nothing burger. And the Democrats they want Mueller to continue because, again, they want to be able to go into 2020 saying Trump is still under investigation for Russia collusion. And I guarantee you, when we get to 2020, they're going to be back saying, Russia is helping Donald Trump, if in fact Trump is still in office, because the Democrats are already talking impeachment for whatever. What a mess it is over there. It's just a little over 6 hours until the government officially shuts down unless some agreement can be made. And apparently Trump is trying to talk to a lot of the Senate members to get them to vote for the spending bill. So he's clearly working to keep the government open and operating, which is not how corporate media is going to report it. Okay, as you know, the U.S. military is going into the cloud, and it's a huge contract, $10 billion, coveted by 4 of America's biggest technology companies. Oracle has filed a lawsuit over the fact that one of the Pentagon's employees who was working on the cloud computing project had previously worked for Amazon's cloud computing division and apparently has now gone back to Amazon. And so Oracle is alleging that there's a little bit of insider influence going on there, which is entirely possible here. Former Phoenix area Sheriff Joe Arpaio has filed a defamation lawsuit seeking $300 million against 3 news outlets, including CNN, The Huffington Post, and Rolling Stone. The lawsuit is primarily focused on CNN because of a statement by an anchorman who stated that Arpaio was a convicted felon. It is absolutely not true, and I hope he wins his lawsuit. And I hope he doesn't have a judge that will say, well, CNN didn't, mean to do wrong, so we'll reduce the award here. Apparently, Deutsche Bank is in a death spiral. It's hitting historic lows. It's dragging the other European banks down with it. Okay, there's the music time for our station identification, and we will be right back with the lovely Lady Claire. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. And for those of you watching on YouTube, the gorgeous creature sitting next to me is the lovely Lady Claire, who joins us on Fridays. And Claire, you indicated earlier that you wanted to talk about what Trump may have been thinking when he ordered that pullout.
Yeah, his sort of...
Oops, I'm sorry. It would probably help if I turned up your volume.
Thank you, dear. I think that his coming to logic moment had to do with the phone call that he got from Erdogan last Friday. And now the phone call wasn't really wonderful, because what Erdogan told President Trump is that his people are going to be planning a massive attack against the Kurds, and any American outposts excuse me, would be in the way.
Okay.
And what I'm thinking might have happened was that, okay, we know that Turkey is a NATO member, as is the United States, yes. Okay? And I think part of that pullout was not to see NATO forces fighting among themselves in a hot situation, and that the better thing for him to do was withdraw the troops.
That may be one of his reasons.
Yeah.
One of the things I was speculating on before is that he was reacting to these statements that were coming out from people like Mattis and Pompeo, that we were going to keep our forces in Syria basically forever to garrison the country. And there's another aspect that we should be looking at. First of all, Trump himself has indicated that what this is probably a part of is a redeployment of the U.S. military's now limited resources to focus on Iran, North Korea, Russia, and China. But there is another political dimension. As you know, over the last couple of weeks, the Federal Reserve has started raising the prime rate, which has driven the stock market down. And it's basically erasing all of the gains of the Trump economy. And Trump even tweeted on out, "Are you trying to wreck the economy?"
It looks like it, Mike.
It does, and it's being done for political gain because, again, everybody's already thinking about 2020. We're not even out of 2018 yet. They're thinking 2020, we've got to undo Trump's promised great economy so we can campaign against him in 2020. And if retirees are left hungry and more people are made homeless, well, that's just politics, and we can go along with that. So it may be that Donald Trump realized that if he's going to have a chance in 2020, he's got to make good on some of his campaign promises. And one of his most important campaign promises, at least to me and I suspect to a majority of Americans, was this promise to extract us from all of these wars all over the world. And so Trump may have a motive in getting us out of Syria and getting half our troops out of Afghanistan to basically counter the Federal Reserve's attack on his economy. So that he's got something to run on himself when it comes to 2020. But I admire his spine. I think it was a good thing that Mattis left. And as others have observed, Mattis was considered the last official close to Donald Trump who could restrain his what they call the isolationist impulse, which means we don't really want to go on out and mess with the rest of the world. In other words, putting America first and making America great is now front and center again. So this was a good move overall. It's a good move for Trump politically going into 2020. It's a good move certainly for all those soldiers and their families, and some of them may actually be able to make it home in time for Christmas. And it's another good move because it's basically showing the American people who the real war hawks are, because they're now up there stamping and screaming. But we're seeing across the corporate media is clearly divided on this. Some are saying Trump is a maniac. Some people are saying he's got to be removed from office. Then you have other people like Tucker Carlson who's saying this was the right decision. We've been in Syria for 7 years. We've spent all that money, shed all that blood, killed all those civilians. And what have we actually accomplished there that benefited the people of the United States of America? And the answer is absolutely nothing.
I agree. I couldn't agree more. Absolutely.
And the same thing could be said about Afghanistan. We've been there for 17 years now. And the only ones to benefit from the U.S. presence in Afghanistan, along with the defense contractors, are the oil companies who have that pipeline at below market rates.
Of course.
And the drug lords and pharmaceutical companies, but I repeat myself, here in the United States of America. Because the Taliban, if they come back into control of Afghanistan, they will shut those poppies down. They have zero tolerance policies. Okay, I was just looking at Fox News at the banner, and apparently Chuck Schumer is now out there screaming at Donald Trump, to abandon this policy of a government shutdown because he's never, ever, ever going to get the wall. And so this has now apparently become very personal between Schumer and Pelosi on one side and Donald Trump on the other. And we're a little less than 6 hours away from the shutdown. Trump is indicating that he's willing to let the shutdown go on for a month or longer. And we can expect the corporate media to declare that Trump shut down the government, but it isn't Trump. It's the Democrats. The Democrats are willing to shut down this government and cut essential services to needy American people to push their open borders agenda. And we have seen this time and time again. because the Democrats know that the more illegal immigrants come into this country and are registered to vote, even though they're not supposed to, the better it is for them.
Right.
And it's already basically being, the suspicion is that it was the changing demographics of California, where so many of the illegals wind up, why so many of those House districts flipped from Republican to Democrat.
Yep.
So
I can see it. I think when we're talking also about Syria, we need to take a little look at what is happening in Israel. I do not know quite how Netanyahu took Trump's decision to withdraw from Syria, but I don't think it was a very warm moment between them.
He slapped that telephone pretty hard. He got on that phone and said, what are you doing? And apparently tried very hard to get Trump to reverse his decision. Trump stood firm. All of a sudden, we're seeing a new Donald Trump. We're seeing a Donald Trump who actually is acting presidential. And he's showing some spine. He's got his presidential brass knuckles on. And I think it's long overdue. If he had done this before the midterm elections, the Republicans probably would have held on more to the House.
I think so. I think you're absolutely right.
But better late than never. Great that Mattis is gone. Unfortunately, we can expect the Senate, especially the Democrats in the Senate, they're going to give any Trump nominee for the next Secretary of Defense a good going over during confirmation.
A metaphysical waterboarding, if you will.
Metaphysical waterboarding is a good term. Just like they're doing or getting ready to do for his pick for Attorney General, because they're terrified that William Barr might actually shut the Mueller investigation down. And he's got every reason to do so. All this time, all the money. Mueller was supposed to be looking at the Trump-Russia collusion. He found nothing. So he just branched out on this huge fishing expedition. They entrapped Michael Flynn.
Of course.
And basically trying to get Trump's best advisors out to replace with their own people. And I think all of a sudden, thank goodness, I think Trump has really woken up to the reality of what's around him.
I think he's had his Buddha on the road moment in terms of how DC
Well, in this case, it's Buddha in the Oval Office. No insult meant about Trump's girth. But I think the revelation, Comey's admission that when he briefed Trump on the Steele dossier, that he neglected to tell Trump that the Democrats had paid for it. If Trump has been made aware of that.
Man.
But again, Trump is surrounded by people who want to filter everything that he's seeing, hearing, and reading. All I can hope is that Trump is spending more time on the internet, not to tweet, but to start reading.
And listening.
Listening. Right now, Donald Trump needs a Merlin the Magician to his King Arthur. And for those of you who don't understand what I'm talking about, in the Arthurian legend, the value of Merlin to Arthur wasn't that he could do magic and he could steal Stonehenge from Ireland and all the other things it was claimed that he could do. It was that Merlin was the one person at court who could operate smoothly at every level in society. He could walk out of Camelot and mingle with the common people and find out what they were thinking and feeling, and then bring it back to King Arthur so that he was fully informed and he could be a good ruler. Trump needs that. Now, he doesn't need a physical person. He's got the internet if he chooses to use it. But clearly something has happened, and we're seeing a new Donald Trump.
My fingers are crossed here, Mike, because as our listeners and readers know, we were more in the Trump camp because we couldn't imagine how horrendous another Clinton presidency would be. And there are a lot of things he's done that have really annoyed us. This doesn't annoy me. I'm beginning to think you are absolutely right on this. Trump is facing all of these tests, and I think he's just decided it's time to basically stand up. Maybe he got visited by the ghost of Christmas yet to come or something overnight. And somebody came on in and said, "Keep the spirit of Christmas, and by the way, you're really the president. Act like it." I love it.
So but something has clearly happened. Because, again, last March, Trump was talking about pulling out of Syria, and he was pushed back from that by his advisors and Netanyahu. And clearly, he's sick and tired of that.
Yeah.
Because every time he listens to his advisors, it goes bad for him.
Yeah.
Not just as the president, but as a potential 2020 candidate. And somewhere along the way, he said, enough is enough. This is going to stop. And I think there are going to be some major, serious shakeups at the White House upper levels in the coming weeks, coming months.
Yeah.
Because there are some, and I've said it before, Trump's biggest mistake coming into the White House was he wanted to be magnanimous in victory, and he allowed all these Obama holdovers to remain, and just presumed that because he was now the boss, that they would be loyal and working for him, which is how it generally works in the world of business and real estate. It's not how it works in Washington, D.C., where everybody has compromising connections and hidden loyalties and hidden agendas. And I think Trump finally realized that. I hope this is permanent. I hope we're going to keep on seeing the new Trump here. This situation with the border wall is the next test.
Yeah.
And we'll see what happens with that. But there are so many people angry with him.
Yeah.
A word of caution for anybody from the White House who's listening to this show. This all of a sudden recognition that he's the president and he wants to do the job properly was something that John F. Kennedy went through himself.
Yes.
And that carries a warning. John F. Kennedy, during his whole youth, he was a wild party boy. He got some girls in trouble. That's why his father shipped him off into the Navy to the South Pacific. And they actually put him in an area where there was no combat expected. But they accidentally ran into that Japanese ship, which led to the whole PT-109, which turned John F. Kennedy into a hero and helped his political career. And when Kennedy went into the White House, he was still kind of a wild guy, wound up having an affair with Marilyn Monroe and various other people. But at some point, it does seem that Kennedy looked around that White House and said, this isn't a party game anymore. This is for real. This is the White House, and I am the president. And he started doing things that angered a lot of people. He wanted to get out of Vietnam.
Yeah.
He wanted to end the race to the moon in favor of a cooperative mission with the Soviet Union.
Oh, that would have been wonderful had it been allowed to go forward.
Oh, it would have been. And, I think one of the milestones of space exploration was that joint Apollo-Soyuz flight, which said it could be possible, which basically was the forerunner of all the stuff we're doing with the space stations today. But again, Trump has just made a lot of enemies, and he needs to be really cautious about his security.
Yes.
Because we have elements in this country, like the military-industrial complex, like the CIA, like organized crime, who would like to see him come to harm.
Yeah.
So I would like to see the opposite. I'd like him to be very healthy and competent and continue to be the new Donald Trump, because that's what we voted for.
I agree, Mike. I'd like to go back to Netanyahu, though.
Okay.
But as you said, I would have imagined that the phone in Tel Aviv got slammed down pretty darn hard.
I imagine he probably broke that handset.
Yeah, I would think so. So here is what he has said yesterday. Now, we all know that Bibi Netanyahu is just on the cusping edge of having charges for corruption brought against him.
The final decision will be Israel's Attorney General,
Right.
And if that Attorney General in Israel is as crooked as the Attorney Generals we've had in this country, then Netanyahu, like Hillary Clinton, is going to skate. I can just see that Israeli Attorney General saying, he didn't mean to do harm. Really, he didn't intend to do this stuff.
But what we have here is a situation where politically, right now, Netanyahu is very damaged. And no human or animal is in a worse place than when they are hurt, damaged. You don't know what they're going to try to do. So what he is saying is that he will keep consistently trying to remove Iran from Syria. Now, I don't know if Putin got the memo on that, honey, but with Syria having been defended now by this incredible defense system, I mean, what is he thinking the IDF could do? I'm at a loss here.
Well, Netanyahu, like any world leader, is willing to throw away military assets, including human lives, to score points.
Yeah.
What may be the one thing holding him in check is that Russia is now saying it will be okay for Syria to mount reciprocal attacks.
Yeah.
If Israel flies into Syria and, for example, bombs the Damascus airport, Syria will fly into Israel and bomb the Tel Aviv airport. And that is really going to get the shooting going.
Yeah.
But you're right. The Russian air defense system is the game changer. And it is noteworthy that since those systems came online, Israel has been kind of very cautious about risking its aircraft.
Yes.
And part of that may be from the U.S. concerns over the fact that the F-35 is turning out to not only be a very lumbering, unmaneuverable aircraft, but that it may not even be as stealthy as they once thought. If Russia were able to shoot down an F-35 over Syria, it would result in the immediate cancellation of F-35 orders from all over the world and just crush all of the companies.
Oh, yeah, Lockheed Martin, all the other big ones that are involved.
Yeah, they would take a major hit. So when Trump and Netanyahu were still talking friendly to each other, Trump may have said, keep those back. The problem is that everything else that Israel has is wide open and vulnerable to those missiles here.
Yeah. I think the F-35, if you will, has become the Edsel of military jets.
It really has. It is a boondoggle,
Yeah.
and unfortunately, the way military procurement works, where they hand out these contracts to various congressional districts to keep the money pouring in. This is why so many very costly, very bad weapon systems get made and get supported. And the F-22 is still asphyxiating its pilots. It's turning out that's not as stealthy as it's supposed to be. All right, we're going to take a break for commercials, and we will be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And headline just now on the news is apparently the Supreme Court has overruled Donald Trump on the issue of limited asylum. And I think probably Donald Trump is kind of wondering if Kavanaugh was really the best choice for that vacant seat, because this is now the second time that Kavanaugh has basically gone with the liberals on the court. So we were talking about the high cost of all these weapons. I mean, huge amounts of money.
Billions and billions.
Trillions and trillions.
Yeah, that too.
A trillion here and a trillion there, and soon you're talking some real money. And it's basically like so many other things in the United States, it's a scam.
Yeah.
Because it's all about making the money. And one of the reasons why China and Russia are able to build not just weapons, but superior weapons for much less money, is that's the goal of their defense industries. We're going to build weapons that are going to get out there and work. In the United States, over time, and Eisenhower warned us, the military-industrial complex has become a big, money-making, corrupt machine. And a lot of what they put out is junk. It's all being played by politics. There was that scandal involving the M16 back during Vietnam, where Pentagon officials who held investments in a competing arms manufacturer literally sabotaged the early tests of the M16. And the fact that that would have left our soldiers with an inferior weapon really didn't bother them at all. So we see these weapons get proposed, and they take on a life of their own, where so many contracts are spread to so many districts of so many congressmen, so many states of so many senators, it becomes impossible to end the program. And again, I've talked about this before. There's a very funny book and an even funnier movie called The Pentagon Wars.
Oh, yes.
And it's the true story of the development of the Bradley infantry fighting vehicle. And I understand it is available on the internet someplace, and you really ought to take a look at it, because it shows how they just kept changing the concept of the Bradley and to where it basically turned into something that was very difficult to use and very expensive. But they couldn't cancel it because too many people were making money off of it. And a lot of military procurement in the United States is very much like that. And the end result is our kids are going into combat zones with equipment that doesn't always work, that jams, because it's not there to be used. It's there for the defense contractors to make money.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And if I could make a change in the process, no defense contractor could give a dime, a penny, to any political person running at the national level.
Well, that would solve part of the problem.
Yeah.
But again, by handing out these contracts to these congressmen's districts or senators' states, they're going to curry favor anyway, because this creates jobs. It makes the politicians look good. But it is a truly corrupted system.
Oh, yeah.
And the end result is things like the F-22, which is still asphyxiating its pilots, the F-35, which everybody now agrees is a complete boondoggle, the Zumwalt self-destroyer, the Freedom and Independence class littoral combat ships, which may be discontinued before they ever see a day of actual combat. The Gerald R. Ford, they're still dealing with all the problems with that one, and that one has been judged by Pentagon officials to potentially never really be usable in a real combat situation. But boy, does it look impressive when it pulls in here to Pearl Harbor.
Well, the other part of this, I think, is that in the documentation for the contract, that military contract will specifically say this will be ready when it's supposed to, no cost overruns. If there are cost overruns and the equipment fails to work as promised, the head of that company is going to spend some time in a prison.
Well,
the first time that happens, I think we'll start to get responsibility, as draconian as that sounds, Mike.
It is draconian, and it sounds good, but under current U.S. law, corporate executives are never held accountable for the actions of their corporations unless a deliberate criminal act is uncovered. And the military-industrial complex thrives on cost overruns. They thrive on cost-plus contracts. I got to see a lot of this stuff up close and personal many years ago when I was involved in that kind of work, and it was just staggering. The amounts of money that were just pouring on through this whole system. And that's really what it was all about, just keeping that fire hose of money going. And at the expense of the American people, at the expense of you, the taxpayer. All right, we got to take another break for commercials, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And before we get back to Claire, we have a caller on the line. Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, first I want to wish both of you a good Christmas.
Well, Merry Christmas back to you, too.
Yes.
And what was that guy's name? The one who didn't want you to say Merry Christmas?
Gutierrez.
Merry Christmas to you, too. Merry Christmas.
Good for you, Dustin. Good for you.
What a piece of garbage that dude is. I'm sorry,
and
but what's wrong with these, Mike? What's wrong with these people? They hate everything.
They do. They do, and probably even themselves, and they just want to spread that all around. They seem to have this idea that nobody should be allowed to celebrate their own traditions and history, and of course that's coming right out of the globalist agenda here. But for all of our listeners out there, Merry Christmas, and if you're offended by that, be offended. I don't care.
I hear you. I hear you.
Yeah, it's just saying how what these people just. I don't know if they weren't born like this. They've been indoctrinated to just hate everything anymore. What a sad sad group of people.
I have a thought on that. Yeah, I have a thought on that. And it was, if you will, the weaponizing of language into politically correct to control people and make
Yes.
them think this is the right way to do and to be.
Well, actually, political correctness is all about tricking us into self-censorship.
Yeah.
You know,
I hear
you
you.
can't say Merry Christmas. It'll offend the Muslims, and it'll offend the Jews, and it'll offend the Kwanzans and everything.
Mhm.
Let them be offended. I really don't care. You cannot have freedom and still say and be offense-free. The two are mutually exclusive. If
Absolutely.
you're exercising your freedom to live your life the way you want to live it, there's going to be somebody who doesn't like it. And one of the things that I really dislike about this whole political correct movement is everyone is running around. Their self-value is now based on finding things to be offended about.
Wow.
You know
I
what's
mean-
funny, Mike?
Yeah.
So Nancy Pelosi, remember she got caught the other day saying Happy Holiday. You know what she's saying to her grandkids?
Yeah.
Merry Christmas, because they're a fraud. They're a fraud. Only in public they do that, Happy Holiday.
Mhm.
In private they go, Merry Christmas, my children. You know,
Yeah.
they're frauds. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, what a joke these people. But Mike, I want to let you know. I don't know if you talked about this. Russia tested a hypersonic missile from a ship. Did you hear about that?
Yes, they did.
Yes.
Yeah, that's amazing, right? Yeah, man. I mean, and then did you hear about China's Jingnan shipyard grows
Yes.
radically inside?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, so they're building up. I mean,
Hmm.
China's growing and we're declining because they are the new empire. I know people don't want to hear that because I'm always saying that. They are where the gold flows to the east, from the west to the east.
Hmm.
They are building technologically because of Huawei, 5G.
Hmm.
They're the new technology empire, believe it or not. You know, I mean, people think, we got Facebook, Twitter, right? Google. China's technology has surpassed us, believe it or not.
Well, China,
Well, people don't want to
the,
hear
the
that.
Chinese people have always been innovators. I mean, go back and look at some of the ancient history. They have recently discovered that some of China's ancient swords were actually plated to make them corrosion resistant.
Whoa.
If you go back and look at this Chinese admiral, Zheng He, who is thought to have actually reached the Middle East with his ships. His ships were designed with watertight compartments, and we're talking centuries before the idea occurred to Western shipbuilders. So the Chinese they've been amazingly clever throughout history.
Hmm.
It's just something that they have.
And they're very hard working.
And they're very hardworking, and they're a manufacturing powerhouse now. They've built their manufacturing up over the same period of time that the United States allowed its manufacturing to decline. And the world is rushing to buy the Chinese products.
And Russian.
And Russian products, especially the Russian agriculture. Russia is now GMO-free. And meanwhile, the United States, we've allowed our manufacturing to decline to the point where even our weapons aren't that good anymore. And a lot of our top designers have been successfully lured away to other countries where people who know how to make things are treated with much more respect than they are here in the United States.
Yep.
And, the U.S. is throwing its military might around the world to try and get the world to buy our products. And the rest of the world is saying no. They're tired of the hegemonic domination of the dollar. More and more, we're seeing countries that are dropping the dollar and going to their own currencies. In this day and age of instantaneous financial transactions, there's no need for a single global currency. But the U.S. government is trying to drag us all back, literally, to the middle of the last century, to 1950, to the world of Cold Wars and Bretton Woods.
And it's not going to work.
No, it's not going to work because back in the 1950s, the United States was a manufacturing powerhouse. They were an agricultural giant. They used to call the United States the breadbasket to the world because we had just amazing agricultural exports. But now, between redevelopment of the land and GMO and the degradation of all those irrigation systems that were built to turn what was effectively desert into arable farmland. We can't go back there. We are an empire in decline. There's no question.
And I think Trump knows that because maybe that's part of the reason he's pulling. I mean, what country's broke?
Yeah.
What's going on in France? We're broke.
Mm-hmm.
We're broke and worn out. That's it. You know, I mean, you have a certain time period, years, to be an empire, and then you decline, and that's just a fact. Because if you look at the past empires, it's the same thing.
Well,
we had our day in the sun.
Mm-hmm. Every empire, if you will, has a life cycle.
Yes.
A beginning, a middle, and an end.
It's basically enthusiasm and pride in what you're doing. Then you get the population into complacency. Then the government gets them into dependency to keep them under control. And from there, it's just a decay. And I am still convinced that the eventual fate of the U.S. government is a Soviet Union-style collapse. And it may even happen in 2019 because I've never seen such factionalized infighting on public display by the U.S. government in my entire life. Plus, we're looking at the economy is showing signs of coming up on a major, major correction. So everybody better, get the seatbelts on. It's going to be a rough ride. Anyway,
Absolutely.
Dustin, thank you for the phone call. We're going to let you go and switch over to James in Charlotte. Aloha, James. Thank you for waiting. What's on your mind?
Yes. Happy holidays, Mike.
Thank you. Merry Christmas to you.
Yes.
Merry Christmas.
Yes, Merry Christmas.
I wanted to mention something, but before I get to it, you happened to mention the Chinese Admiral Zhang He,
Yeah.
or however it's pronounced.
Mm-hmm.
It's really an amazing story if you look and you find any information on it, what he achieved a century before Columbus.
Yeah,
Yes.
he was an amazing guy.
And then the dynasty, I think it was Ming Dynasty, but the dynasty that took over the Mongols came after that and just completely eradicated him from all of the history, destroyed any reference to him at all as if he had never existed.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, that was kind of a common practice in ancient times among many cultures. I mean, if you go over and you look at the monuments of ancient Egypt, you'll very often find where previous pharaohs or people out of favor are literally chiseled off the stone to just make them go away. In Egypt's case, that was because of a religious belief that as long as people remembered who you were, you would never really die. So if you destroyed all of their monuments and edifices and tablets, that they would basically flow off and disappear in the underworld and go off to the Egyptian version of, I don't know, I'm looking for the word.
I would think
between heaven and earth, there was limbo.
Yeah.
That was it.
Yeah.
Limbo. Okay. But getting on back to China, prior to the time of Emperor Qin Huangdi, China was all these separate little warring kingdoms, and they were constantly fighting each other. And as one would create victory, they would consolidate their power by erasing the history of those that they had conquered, just as Israel is trying to do today in Palestine. So I guess it's a primitive behavior that hasn't quite yet gone out of fashion.
Yeah. Well, that's not really even the subject I was calling about. What I wanted to just throw out for discussion is who do you think is going, if we do have a government shutdown, who do you think is going to end up owning it? Is it on whose back is
Schumer
it going to be?
or Trump.
Good?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, the corporate media is going to say it was Donald Trump here, but everybody looking at how the Democrats are just they're willing to let the government shut down over Trump's border wall. And I think a lot of people could be forgiven for starting to think that Schumer has now made this a personal issue for him. And that statement that he issued earlier today, where he just flat out said, "You will never get your border wall." I think indicates that Schumer has forgotten the people he's supposed to be representing. I mean, Americans are overwhelmingly in favor of stronger border controls. I mean, that GoFundMe for the wall is now over $18 million.
Whoa.
And that's a message Schumer should be paying attention to.
I agree.
I hope Trump knows about that GoFundMe site.
I'm sure by now he's found out here. You know, I think Trump, when he gets on the internet, he needs to spend less time Twittering and more time visiting websites like whatreallyhappened.com. Plug, 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 plug,
Yes.
plug, 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 plug.
Well, I think you're right. I think that Schumer definitely has overstepped his bounds and has made some statements that he's gonna regret making.
Yeah.
Well, it all
agree.
depends on what happens. It's going to come down to a case of which one of them caves first. And again, I'm liking the new Trump that we're seeing, the president with some spine, who's now acting presidential. And I'm expecting Trump really is going to stand firm. And I think he really means it when he says he'll see this government shut down for a month. Which is going to cause a lot of hardship for the people who work in those various governments, departments that will be affected by the shutdown, such as in the national parks and so forth and so on. Apparently, the Department of Homeland Security, part of that is going to shut down.
Okay.
Good. You know, they can stop fondling us at the airport. Anything else, James?
No, nothing else. I'm not going to worry about the government shutdown. I think I'm very secure. I'm not dependent
I'm not
on it.
worried about it at all. I'm not dependent on the government for anything, and I feel bad for those people whose lives are going to be disrupted in this little feud between Trump and Schumer. And that's really what it is. It's descended to the level of a feud, like the Hatfields and the McCoys.
It feels like a wrestling grudge match.
Yes.
The verbal equivalent thereof.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, James, we're going to let you go. Thank you very much for the phone call. And let's get on back to what you wanted to talk about.
Well, there's a gentleman whose work I've looked at and linked to before, brilliant analyst by the name of Pepe Escobar.
Yes.
And this comes from Zero Hedge, which is a site that I like to go to because the gentleman who's the webmaster over there does a lot of really interesting work and analysis. And he was talking about Crimea and the U.S. Now, everyone who is not sleeping under a rock probably knows by now that President Petro Poroshenko desperately needs a diversion from his terrible, corrupt government. And what they've done is illegal, according to the Minsk agreements. They've bombed cities in Donbass and the recent Kerch incident. Now, there's a reason for this, folks. Poroshenko is polling at, drumroll please, a lousy 8%. Now, what he did with the Kerch incident was to declare martial law. He wanted 3 months, but fortunately Kiev's legislature had the horse sense to just give him 1. So he is bound to lose the next elections. And this is interesting to me. Over 2 million Ukrainians post-Putsch, post-Poroshenko have already voted with their feet and sought refuge in Russia.
Many of them soldiers.
Yeah. Now, what Poroshenko can't do is to launch a full-scale war on Donbass with no weapons funds and not much support from the EU.
But he's sure been talking tough. He's talking about we're going to liberate the Donbass. And again, it could turn out that Donald Trump is pulling the assets out of Syria to send them into Ukraine.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
And I would like for our readers and listeners to remember that if they ever heard the A word, as in annexation, again, in terms of Russia.
I saw that in Jeopardy last night.
And Crimea come out of the mouth of some person whose thinking process may not go all the way to a logical conclusion and who believes that they are truly informed please show this to them. Okay. All right. Thank you. And please politely remind them that it was President Obama who publicly stated in an interview in CNN that the U.S. was part of the group to broker regime change in Ukraine, which threw Yanukovych, the duly elected leader, under the proverbial bus and appointed Petro Poroshenko to the job. And Mike, this election was more crooked than a dog's hind leg.
Oh,
right?
they had to screw those ballots into the ballot boxes.
Yeah. But what I really don't like about this, blaming countries for stuff they haven't done, as in the case of Russia allegedly annexing Crimea, followed by stiff sanctions, as the U.S. has done in the case of China and Iran also, Mike, that can have a boomerang effect on the countries doing the sanctioning and fighting those declaring the sanctions in some very tender areas.
All right, we got to take another break here for
Okay.
our last commercial of this show here, and we'll be back with the last segment of our program
Okay.
after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and I want to remind everybody once again that Republic Broadcasting is giving the hardworking crew, staff, on-air talent Monday and Tuesday off. That's Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. So we will not be back live until next Wednesday. So here's hoping that you all have a pleasant, relaxing holiday weekend, that nobody tries to exploit Christmas to make a political statement, which is always a risk, especially in these dark times here.
Yeah.
Claire, do you have anything to add to that?
Yes, I do. I wanted to wish my brother and sister Christians a wonderful Christmas, and also to wish all conductors, accompanists, and performers and singers one wonderful and beautiful Christmas program, the beauty of which touches not only the performers but also the people of the congregation, and that somehow those very good feelings get translated in to kindness and caring, and remembering that sometimes we, you and me, are the only face of Christ's compassion some people will ever see. I know when I'm doing marketing and I can tell that a receptionist has had a really lousy day, and when she puts me on hold and looks for something for me and comes back and, Claire, this is the person, this is the email, I will say thank you and bless you. You have a great day. And sometimes I would bet you that's the only bit of kindness that gal had that day.
I would agree with that,
Yeah.
because, politeness, honorifics, courtesy, that seems to be politically incorrect as well these days. And I think it's another indicator of the deterioration of our society. But again, we're at the holiday here, and I'm hoping that many of you are going to be able to spend time with your families. And probably would be best not to talk about politics at
No.
these family get-togethers.
No, probably not.
And one more reminder for those of you who have been following along the front site promotion. It ends next Tuesday. Well, actually, it goes through Monday, and that's it. Monday, midnight, it's over and done with. And so if you want to grab that, you got to do it real soon. Maybe Santa will leave enough money in your stocking where you can put something in RBN's stocking,
Yes.
and get that deal. If I lived anywhere around Nevada, I would take this deal myself. It is that sweet. And anyway, so have a really good holiday. Please be safe. Please be careful on the roads. A lot of people celebrate the holidays. Their idea of Christmas spirits is whiskey.
Yes.
And they don't have the wisdom to stay at home.
Yeah.
be
Whiskey
sober
and
on the
Everclear.
road,
Yeah.
be drunk at home.
Yes.
That's my motto.
Or have a designated driver who's not
Or have a designated
drinking.
driver.
Yeah, that all works.
Or even better, somebody in another car who's the designated decoy,
Okay.
who drives like they're drunk to draw the police away.
Oh, no.
And then they
I
pass
love you.
their breathalyzer.
I
and
love
they're
you,
allowed to.
dear, but no.
Okay.
All right. Merry Christmas.
All right, there's the music. Time for us to get on out of here. We'll be talking to you. Well, first of all, stay tuned for. Well, I don't know who's covering John Stedmiller's show today.
Okay, all
but
right.
stay tuned for the show anyway.
It'll be great.
Listen. You will listen.
It'll be great.
It's the re-education camp. Take what you've learned here, share it with everyone that you know. Please donate to Republic Broadcasting. Please donate to whatreallyhappened.com. And we'll be back next Wednesday live. Aloha, America.